Today is not the day for golfing. It's like stormy and stuff.
Oh yeah. I guess they got like 8 holes in and then they went in and got lunch and I'm sure they're back out now that it's not raining.
I remember as a kid,
Yeah.
my uncle played golf, and I just remember all the like stories about trying to be careful to not get struck by lightning when you have a metal club in your hand. I don't
Yeah,
know. Those
you're
these
like
are like the
holding it up in the
golfs.
air.
Yeah, the stories about like I
Uh,
was just camping out underneath a pine tree on the golf course. A
right,
thunderstorm.
right. The bag of metal.
Yeah, seems smart.
Sweet. So forgive me if I have to be like, yo, go to sleep. We didn't get home until very late last night. We were at the post dance recital celebration for my niece at my sister's house. It's like the blessing and the curse of like we live so close that it's completely and incredibly too easy to just stay there too late because you're like basically at home already. We didn't get home until 9:30 and normally they go to bed at 7:45, 8 o'clock. So we had some attitudes today. Too much fun, too much overstimulation, but yeah, we basically got home and threw them in bed so they woke up with like dirty feet still this morning and
It's fine.
right?
I'm going to introduce the podcast before we tell any more stories, just in case somebody has stumbled across this podcast and is like, "What are they talking about?" This
Great.
does not. Yeah. So, welcome to Enneagram Adventure. This is Tana and I's podcast where we talk a lot about life, and we try to always put it through the lens of the Enneagram. Sometimes we're more successful at that than other times, but today, hopefully, we'll stay on at least somewhat on topic with some life stories because we're going to talk about lines. But Tana and I are IEQ 9 certified coaches with that Enneagram tool, which, if you're curious about it, hit us up. We would love to help you get hooked up with that assessment. Anything you want to add before we keep going on stories?
Just my disclaimer of the Enneagram is the particular assessment that Holly and I use measures your core motivation rather than your behavior. So it's different than like a DISC or Myers-Briggs or Strength Finder or any of the other assessments that you may have taken before. And one other disclaimer, just for everybody out there, is like I've not seen a lot of wonderful free Enneagram assessments. So that's probably worth a reminder of if there is an Enneagram assessment that you take and it's free and you read through it and you're like, I don't really, that doesn't resonate with me. That doesn't make sense for me. Consider the source. Um, and if you have any questions about where to find a good assessment, we can hook you up if you want to slide into our messages or if you know us personally, send us a text. But that is worth a reminder. It's come
For
up for
sure.
me a few times lately of like, hey, I stumbled on your podcast and I took this free one, but it doesn't really make sense. I'm like, well,
Yes, that is a good disclaimer to put out there. This week, you and I were in an Enneagram session together. It's the largest one I've ever taught. Had 55 participants, I think. So big. It was a big group. And coming out of that, I got a lot of questions like, oh, I want my spouse to take it or my kids or whatever. Is there an assessment that's less expensive? And I'm like, well, yes, less expensive or free. And I was like, well, yes, but I wouldn't recommend a free one at
yeah,
all. I have yet to come across one that feels super accurate and have heard from multiple folks like you brought up, right, where they're like, well, I got this result and it just doesn't quite resonate with me, and so I now I think the Enneagram is crap. Well, yes, you have to actually, take one or work with somebody who knows a little something to get something that's more accurate.
and if you see a like talk therapy therapist, I'm seeing that more and more of them are certified in that tool. So it might be worth asking them as well if you participate in talk therapy, if you don't know already that they're certified, if they are certified, because they may be able to help as well.
Yeah, you can certainly ask that if you have a lot of interest in the Enneagram. You can ask if your therapist is Enneagram informed, is what they would say. All right, we've gotten some of that stuff out of the way, but today we're going to talk about lines. And this did a little bit come out of this big session that we were in this week in terms of this podcast, because there were some questions sort of on the backside about, well, how it was mostly about kids. Like, is there any correlation between my Enneagram type and what my kid's Enneagram type might be? That was sort of the first part of it. So that inspired us to discuss the lines a little bit and how they work. We may touch a little bit on a handful of things as part of discussing the lines: stress line, growth line, soul child. All of those things could come up as part of this discussion. Anything you want to add for lines?
No, but I think it's really interesting that we do get a lot of those questions about kids because, or like the parent relationship, like if they don't have their own children, of like, well, I suspect my parent is X. To some points we've made historically on the podcast, I think it's great that we're all very curious about where this stuff came from and what you're creating if you have children. So again, I suspect that's a little bit generational that we are trying to be informed about, putting well-rounded human beings out into the world. But a disclaimer for every parent is like your kid is going to have some sort of trauma. Like trauma
Yeah.
is it, and it doesn't have to be like super duper significant like tragic trauma, but it will be something that they talk about at some point in their life. So like give yourself some grace.
I think that's a good point, is that everybody has some form of trauma along the way growing up. And even in the best, I think we mentioned this recently on a podcast, right? Like, even if you grew up in the best possible household, childhood situation, parents together, supportive, all of those things, there it could be something not in your household that ends up classifying as trauma. It could be a coach or a teacher or a, a church leader or a scenario in a friend group. We often share stories that we hear from other numbers, but for example, we heard a story from a 4 this week who shared about being in a young kid, like elementary age, and receiving a message from people who she thought were her friend, who were like, "You're too weird. We don't want to be friends with you anymore." Right? That classifies also as trauma.
Yep.
So,
Yep, 1,000%. So yeah, I think that lines, as we're going to talk about today, are super important for understanding your number and others that you are close to. It's probably worth a refresh of what we mean by lines before we get all the way into it. Do you want to refresh us, Holly, on stress and stretch
yes. So,
or release?
or release. Yeah. So the lines on the Enneagram. So if you're familiar with the Enneagram symbol, it's a 9-pointed star. And there are two lines that connect to directly to every number. And those two lines one represents stress, or as the IEQ 9 calls it, stretch, and the other line represents your growth or security line. IEQ 9 calls that the release line. And those lines, when as you learn more about the types and the whole Enneagram system, those lines represent polarity. The two numbers on either side of every line are opposites in some way. And the idea kind of behind this is that you're connected to this, and in certain situations, in certain relationships, the behaviors associated with the number that's opposite you will be exhibited in some way. That's like a super high level, but yes.
Yeah. So, how do we want to start? What number do we want to start with? And I hope we get through all of them. We should be able to.
Yeah, so well, I think a little bit of the goal for today as we talk about these lines is that it can be I want it to be a little tied to like relationship. So maybe we can start with some where we know we have examples. So
Mm-hmm.
like your relationship with your husband is a good example.
Yeah.
So we could talk about it there maybe first. That would be
Yeah.
2 to 8, then we could do 8 to 5. We could try to like follow
Mm-hmm.
like the that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. As a 2, my stress line is 8, and my growth line is 4. I married my stress line. I told I think one story about this when you were teaching that this week, and my stress line, as a reminder, like showing up on the low side of 8 means that I can get very direct, brashy, confrontational, not super in tune with my emotion, but like just expressing, like just like saying the thing without any filter or any like regard for how it might make someone else feel. So I gave a very elementary example of that when my husband, I don't remember why I was stressed out. I don't remember. There was like some sort of external factor, and I was going to a race, and he was kind of calking out the hours for how long I was going to be gone. And the story that I tell myself when he does that is like that this is an inconvenience for him to like parent solo. Is that true? No. But when I am stressed, also low side 2 behavior, like I get pretty resentful. I get to be a bit of a scorekeeper. So look at all of the things that I've done, as of late. I'm stressed out. How dare you try to count the number of hours that I'm going to be gone? Like, how dare you? And I tell him in the moment, it just fell out of my mouth. I said, just pretend I'm golfing. And then he comes back with, well, if I were golfing, I wouldn't be gone for, and that was like right when his statement stopped. And I was like, oop, oop, be really careful about your next statement because I will hold you to it, as in the number of hours he needs to golf 18 holes, right? So that's a very elementary example of how that shows up. But what I would tell you when that 8 shows up, the body feeling is anger. It's like this pit of my stomach, like right in my breastbone, like, ooh. So that is where it shows up on a deeper level. And this is probably worth some reflection for anyone that knows that they've, married their stress line through some recent work with Brandon. I uncovered that I have a rooted issue with men not keeping me safe or putting me in safe situations. And as a result of that, I overcorrected and married a protector. Like in the most literal sense of the word. I completely moved to the other end of the spectrum and married somebody I knew who was going to keep me safe, who was very, very loyal and like has a strong protective nature. So that's probably worth some reflection as well. I'm going to continue working on that with Brandon. But that is kind of the relationship with the stress component. Now, what I will say is, and again, I attribute the work with Brandon for this, but we had some like communication issues this week. This is the last story I'll tell before we can move on to the next thing. But I was feeling frustrated by either a lack of communication, and then when I did get communication, it was very direct. And it was like, I felt like I was being told something rather than consulted with about something. Normally, I would have been like, you know what? Your communication has been shit this week and you're not going to talk. Like, I'm not doing that. And I would have just said it just like that. But I like, we put the kids to bed. We do like our normal routine of like, I feed my fucking sourdough starter and I make the coffee for the next day. And as I'm doing that, I'm like, hey, we need to talk about and focus better on some communication. We're heading into like a very busy summer. I'm not going to like talk specifics about it right now. I just need you to know it needs to be on your radar. I'm not ready to talk about it because if I get frustrated, it won't land well. And he's like, okay, like what? And I'm like, no, I actually mean I can't, like, I'm not going to go into detail right now. I just like, I need it at the front of your mind. And then it worked out much better when I was calmed down. We talked a little bit about it. We set up a system and it's fine.
I think there's a couple things that are interesting about that. And before we move on from like 8 and 2 as a line, so in confirmed couple situations, my brother is an 8, married to a 2, his wife. My friend Nick is an 8, married to my friend Angie, 2, right? So this
Yeah.
this particular pairing of particularly men who marry women that are 2, like male 8s who are marrying female 2s. This in multiple occasions in relationships I see that where it's confirmed, like where I know like that is in fact true. Do you know in your situation with our friend who's a female 8, does she know what her husband is or does she just
Believe
speculate?
I believe he's also an eight.
Oh, 8 and 8. Okay. So, in terms of relationship, I think to your point too, right? Like wanted a protector. I think that that sort of opposite thing where like the helper recognizes the protector in their partner, like that feels like it's sort of that seeing that opposite, like, oh, you are this thing that I am not necessarily, or you are this thing that I need in some way. And even if it's not conscious, because certainly like when I got married, I was not making like a
Oh
conscious
God, no.
decision, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but that sort of subconscious pull to this thing that's the opposite of you or that has the thing that you feel that you need.
Yeah, and I also think that's true the other way around too. I think that two eight pairing, particularly with a male eight and a two female, we can be very understanding, we can be very empathetic, we can want
Maybe
to really understand them.
Maybe a
So
little
we leave
even
a
forgiving of, like, kind of the
yes,
8 behavior that often,
yes,
like, sends other people. Yeah.
uh-huh,
Yeah.
uh-huh. We leave a lot of space for them to be themselves. And it's if you think about how many eights test other people to see, like, are you gonna stick around? Are you are you gonna come back for more? Are you actually my friend? Are you actually, all of those things? Two is very has a lot of capacity for that. Sometimes too much capacity for that.
Yes. Yes. Well, let's talk about the 8 and the 5 because we can talk about that super specifically from my standpoint as well.
Hmm.
My mom is an 8, confirmed, and I am a 5. And so this is then that parent-child relationship, which we kind of hinted at the beginning, like how that could work too. For me, that it was sort of like my mom was like calling a lot of shots, making a lot of decisions. She wasn't necessarily super directive, and I do believe she leans pretty heavily into a 7 wing,
Sure.
which is also interesting because 5, that's the other line for 5 is
Hmm.
7. But for me, it was sort of like she was kind of a big personality, believed really strongly in a lot of things, collected a lot of other people, right? So I I've unpacked this a lot too. Like there were always sort of a lot of people around her that she was involved with in some way, right? Even to this
Yeah.
day, she's like they in the town that they live in, she's like part of the I don't want to say it's the town board, but I don't know what it's called exactly, right? But she helps run the election and like stuff like that.
Right.
Right? So it's also this very like social justice, like got to stand up for the little guy kind of thing that comes out of her. And as a kid, I've hinted at it, like there was a lot of also chaos in our family situation. And I think some of the eightness would come out right in the like trying to control this thing that was out of control in terms of the way our family operated. That drove me. There are multiple reasons. You can go back and listen to the 5 podcast where we talked about it, or if you want more details of this. But you can kind of see like it drove me to that her polarity of quiet, out of the way, keep to myself, nose in a book, safer to be unseen, right? Like just sort of like easy, quiet kid. And she will sometimes talk about that she always like my whole family will talk about how I was a very brave child, and I think that's where like the soul child line comes from. The example that was set for me was this like brashy, bold person who said whatever she wanted and fought back and blah blah blah, all of the things, right? But that became unsafe for me and as I started to grow up, and so pushed into the
Yeah.
5. Yeah.
Yeah. I that makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. And God, that's so interesting that if you think about Soul Child and what role that plays too in this kind of like notion around that age where you decide, you know, what your core motivation is. Oh, that's so
Yeah.
interesting.
And what's interesting too is that my brother that I referred to, who's married to a 2, became an 8. So he became
Mm-hmm.
more like her in his own way.
Mm-hmm.
Um my mom I suspect is a social 8, whereas I'm pretty sure my brother is self-preservation. But like either way, like it's that same, right?
Right.
Like became like that versus me going to the opposite.
Yes.
Okay, so from 5 the line goes to 7. I don't know any relationships confirmed that share that line in terms of marriages, but again, the big 7 energy on that line is very opposite of 5. It's spontaneous, it's outgoing, it's no plans, it's like thinking more quickly, whereas 5s tend to think more slowly. It's always down for a good time, where 5s maybe are conserving their energy. So again, you're seeing like this pull of the opposite in that. And I think also for me, it's part of the reason that 7s are very like I romanticize them and they're attractive to me. Not necessarily as like a life partner, but just like the way that 7s operate in the world, I find very attractive and like want more of that in my life.
Know any, so my sixth cousin, if I remember correctly, her mom is a 9 and she married, so my sixth cousin married a 7.
It,
So not
yeah.
a line, but a wing. My 9, I suspect that my mom is a 6. She has not taken it, but I suspect that she is a 6. And my sister is a 9.
Yeah, I think the 6-9 line, we're gonna have to remember to come back to 7 and 1. But
Yeah, 7 and 1. Yep.
let's do 6-9 really quick because we're just talking about it and you have some examples.
Yep.
So 6 and 9, like in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, makes sense. Because the 9 sort of go with the flow, don't rock the boat, kind of chill energy, with the 6 sort of planning, what about this? What about this? What about this? Prepared for everything. And the 9 will just be like, yeah, no, like, sure. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
And that
Yep.
sharing, because the 6 is the stress point for 9. So there could also be some where they can kind of like get into that same energy together of like prepared for this, prepared for that, like planning
Yep.
for all of these scenarios. So like that
Yep.
makes a ton of
Yep.
sense.
Yeah, and it's funny. So my sister is my half sister. I don't know that I've ever talked about that on here, but we share a mom and have different dads. And so through dance recital weekend, my sister's dad comes to town. This is like the once or twice a year he comes to town, and he lives in Missouri. And he is like the quietest, like most unassuming. He is like in a corner the whole time and just like if he's part of conversation, he's just like laughing in the corner. Like he's just so chill and so laid back. And he's this like mountain of a man that wears overalls. Every time I've seen him, he's in denim overalls. Like he has a huge beard.
This feels like a Missouri stereotype somehow, but yeah.
Oh my God. And he's from Wisconsin, like grew up here, is from around here. He just like moved there. But it's so funny because when I saw him yesterday and he was kind of just like chilling in the corner, I mentioned it to my sister later on. I was like, I think I get where your 9 kind of came from too now. Um, I believe that that is eerily similar to the tactic that my sister used as a kid, which now is really funny to see. Not funny, but maybe interesting to see how she parents, because she parents with this like, no, her daughter's gonna have like a voice and an opinion. And uh it's so funny. I took a picture of the collage that she has in her daughter's bathroom, like a gallery on the wall. And one of the pictures is like, it just all makes sense. Like she's a 9 trying to create not a 9. And one of the things is like this little monster, and it's got text in it that said, I took all the things that gave me fear, I put them in my mouth and chewed them up whole. It's like, I'm not even kidding. It's part of like a gallery in their bathroom. And there's another one behind the toilet that says, I am in charge of my own vibration.
This is how she creates a 4.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, we say that lovingly because I also there is some sort of theory out there too that you could be predisposed, right? Like that it just is it's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit like your nature versus nurture.
Yep. Yep.
But do think nurture plays a part in terms of determining, some of the choices that you make as a kid. And safety always wins. So it's how safe you feel in certain behaviors that end up driving your personality strategy.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I believe that the 4, uh, I do think that my niece is a 4.
Yeah.
Big, big feelings that are a whole identity
I think what's
that come
interesting
up.
about 9 in terms of this example too is that and this is I'm off on a bit of a rabbit hole, so like just go with me. This has nothing to do with lines. But I read a book at some point related to the Enneagram, and I cannot remember what the name of the book is off the top of my head. It might be the Enneagram of Belonging, maybe. But the idea that they talked about with 9 was like 9 sits at the top of the Enneagram. So if you like draw the whole thing, like 9 is the very top number on the 9-pointed star. And there's sort of this like the 9 being able to see all the other types and sort of experience them more objectively maybe than the other numbers see each other, And it does go along with that, like keeping the peace and the harmony and the all of that, like all of the things we love most about nines that come through. And so I can also see for a nine as a parent, especially if it's a conscious nine, like how you describe your sister, that she could see this is about like creating the best life for her child, the best opportunity. And some of those things will be opposite of her, but nine and four don't share a line, right? So this is like, but I do think there is something to that. Like, I see all sides of the nine that's playing into this. Yeah. In terms of parenting.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah. I think for Aaron as a nine, this is not confirmed because his parents haven't taken the Enneagram, but I would put any amount of money on his mom being a nine and that we have a nine that created a nine.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Particularly if, to your point before, there it's not conscious.
Right.
That is interesting.
She would she very much is of the mindset that like nothing is worth fighting over, kind of, right? Like that just sort of is how she operates. And I can remember early in Aaron and I's relationship, there was like a situation he was in. I'm not going to unpack that, but it was like an opportunity where he really could have. He was put in a situation by a friend having to do with money and some different stuff like that, where he really could have like gone after this friend, no long like former friend, to be like, dude, you owe me thousands of dollars. It was like they were supposed to split rent or something, and the guy like just stopped paying. It was like a whole thing.
Wow.
And his mom was like, "Oh, I just don't think it's worth it. Just let it go." Right? So that's like it's those kind of things that to me are like, "Oh, that's very extreme nine behavior of like, yeah, he owes you money, but it's fine. You don't need to you don't need to like have a fight about it." So,
Ugh.
yeah.
Ugh. Let's go back to 7 before we
Okay.
forget.
Yes. So sevens and ones share a line. And again, we're talking about that opposite energy there, right? The sevens, like no plans, easygoing, everything's a good idea, spontaneous line, stress line shared to one, the perfectionist, controlled, black and white thinking, planning, careful, detail oriented.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't have any great examples of 7 and 1.
I don't
Yeah,
I don't either. The
I don't have any great
all
examples.
all of the ones that I know of, my stepdad is a one, married to an eight. I can't think of any other where I like know for sure.
So if you're a 7 and you're listening, or if you're a 1 and you're listening, leave us a comment or something for how it shows up.
But ones, the other line that ones share is to four. Again, we have like that very opposite kind of energy. So one moving to four on their stress line, again, you're seeing like very opposite. So it's the deep feeling, very creative kind
Yep.
of
Yep.
move there. And
Yep.
what's interesting is I have heard from fours where they, because for four, one is the growth, like to go the opposite way is the growth or the release line. And I have heard from fours that they sometimes were misinterpreted as ones growing up, or that they had took on some of those one type of behaviors on that line, particular like in creative pursuits where the thing they were working on could never get it to be quite good enough, or grades or whatever. Have talked about that. There is one four that you and I know who has told me in the past that she believes her mother is a one. So shares that line, but that her mom sort of celebrated in her that more creative side or her more creative pursuits versus the expectation for perfection.
Mhm. It's that same, gosh, particularly with like parent child, I can absolutely see. kind of some of these things. If you think about, because four, I believe that I was set out to be a four in soul child theory. And then life happened and I became a two. So with four being my growth line, I have a really, I have, this is interesting. I have a little rabbit hole-ish, but I have an incredibly easy time relating to fours. I speak the same language that they speak sometimes with their feelings and kind of where that comes from. And I have a lot of space for a four. And as a parent, you try to, in this new, like, social emotional conscious world that we're living in, really reinforce that kind of ability to feel, particularly as a mom of boys. I'm hyper fixated on that. It's like emotions are okay, big feelings are okay. So it'll be interesting to see how many more fours there are in the world in this generation that's being raised, where we identify and to the point of that parent celebrating kind of that creative and emotive side of her. Like, how many more fours are we going to have in the world because of that celebration that's happening, or like speaking to what's happening instead of just shoving our feelings elsewhere and hoping that they disappear.
I hope I part of me is like this whatever. I don't know if this is like morbid or whatever, but I hope I live long enough to see
I know.
what that looks like. Yeah.
I know. Well, it's tough. I had like a slight rabbit hole here. Yesterday, my oldest son was just having a day. Like, poor decisions were being made. Our listening ears were not on. We had like the sassiest of mouths. It's this generational pull that's so hard to fight when those bad days happen. It is so freaking hard to not be like, we do fun things when you are well behaved. And if you are not well behaved, we don't do fun things. And kind of like the gratitude piece of like, you should be grateful. So it was a really hard day for him yesterday. It was a grind for us to parent him yesterday. And it felt like we were disciplining him more than anything else. And that is also super hard because we're in this kind of parenting generation where you're like, you need to be socially emotionally aware. Like, what are they actually asking you for? It's this kind of like underlying thing. When it felt like maybe as kids in our generation, it was always assumed that we were being manipulative,
Yes. I yep.
right?
Yeah, no one
So
I
you're
the number of times I would be like, "I don't feel good," and they'd be like, "Suck it up, you're lying. Go
right,
to
because you're
school."
being
Yeah.
manipulative. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's that's at war with me in my parenting head all of the time. It's this defiance thing. So we get home last night and I was like, wow, that was rough. And I was like, maybe he needs a day where it's just him and the two of us, just him. Like, brother is elsewhere. You get our undivided attention for an entire day just to like go do some fun stuff, just the three of us. And vice versa, right? With the younger one. And it's probably overdue. But it's a grind to try to make sure that you are not fucking up your kids every day, because I like towards the end of the day, I got so impatient with him. I was like, dude, this is unbelievable. And sometimes he'll do this like self-deprecation thing where he's like, I'm the worst, right? Like, I'm naughty. Because I think before, to the manipulation point, he's done that. And I'm like, hold on. Like, we don't talk about ourselves like that. We don't think that about ourselves, you know. He gets like me to hit the pause button when we talk like that. It's this whole mind game of like, how do I raise a decent child without fucking it all up in the press? Who knows what line I'm creating from
But
I
yeah,
feel like I'm
with
creating an eight.
well, he has the example of an 8 in your house also.
Yes.
So,
Yes, he
yes.
does.
And that's not all bad. Okay, let's do 4 and 2 really quick.
Yeah.
Um, you hinted at it though in what you said earlier, right? Of that
Mhm.
you appreciate the 4s and you have a lot of space for them. And I do
Mhm.
think the 4-2 line is curious. Those are the two highest feeling numbers on the Enneagram. One, the 2 is more external, like heart on the sleeve kind of feeling, versus the 4 is a more internal
Mhm.
feeling, but it's the same, right? They're picking up the feelings of the people around them. They feel very deeply themselves. They're comfortable in those. I don't know how, I guess I shouldn't assume that 2s are always comfortable in the feelings, but 4s are comfortable in the feelings
Mhm.
that they're having. So there's like that's like an interesting line to
Mhm.
me because there's similarity, so many similarities in that one. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
as opposite, but the behavior can be very opposite between
Mhm.
the 2 and the 4. Cuz the 2 can be like, let me help you, let me people please,
Yeah.
let me in, let me
Yep.
in, let me in, and the 4 can be like a little bit more like, oh, this is just for me. These are my internal feelings
Mhm.
and no one could
Mhm.
understand them.
I was just gonna say, like, for any twos that are listening, this is probably gonna be a little triggering as I say it, but as we are comfortable in our feelings, I would say. The difference is that sometimes we use the heart on the sleeve, the external way of sharing those emotions for a couple of reasons. One, we like to verbally process, right? That's one thing. But the other thing is it can be used as a if I show you my feelings and this vulnerability, does that mean you're not going to go away? It's like a currency thing that we do because we're solving, like, we want the relationship. So that is really gross to say out loud, but it is sometimes what happens. We can use that kind of outward expression of emotion to manipulate without even realizing it.
I don't feel like 4s are quite the same, but the 4s are really very comfortable in their feelings and sometimes they make people around them uncomfortable and then they like don't know what to do with that cuz they're like I'm fine. Like why are you like weirded
Yeah.
out by my feeling or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to know like the visual that pops in my head is like picture two kids playing in a mud pit of emotion. The mud pit of emotion. The four is just laying in the mud pit, making like
This is
mud angels.
yeah, this is great.
And
Yeah.
the two is making mud pies and delivering them to everyone else.
That's great. I would love to know if anybody listening is a 2 married to a 4, vice versa. I would
Wow,
love
that
to
would
know.
be
I would love to know how that works.
wow.
Yeah.
Because you know what? If I were married to a four, I would be trying to fix all of their problems
Yeah.
all the time. And I would be
4
trying to like fix every like, oh, you're sad about that? I'm gonna fix it. Let's talk about it. I'm gonna give you unsolicited advice.
and the 4 would be like, "No, no, I just want to be sad."
Yeah.
Yeah, be super curious about that. I know of 4 and 7s that are married, but yeah. And not well. This is just like yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we did 6 and 9. We need to do 3 and 6 and 3 and 9. So 3 and 6, they share stress line there where it's the 3 is the stress number for 6. The way that shows up can be again, it's the unhealthy side of a 3 that comes out in that 6. So it can also look a little 8-ish, right? It's like more directive, demanding, more action oriented, pushing forward for things that comes through kind of on that unhealthy side. Less thoughtfulness, jumping, maybe more jumping to conclusions. Again, I don't know any. I don't know any married couples on that line or have any examples of parental relations on that line.
I don't either. There's a three that you and I know that's married to another three.
That's got to be intense to live together.
I feel like one has to be flexing into nine all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if the other one isn't, the other one is.
Yeah. Or we're just
In
very
order for it to
comfortable
work.
with,
Yeah.
yeah. Or
Yeah.
we're just super comfortable with competition all the time, which I do think is probably true in that house now that I think about it, right? Like it's sort of like they're both competitive, but they've learned to
Yeah.
not compete with each other, but like
Yep.
compete together. Yeah, I don't have the best examples, but again, what right, we've got like the opposite there where like the 6 could be on the 6-3 line, they could be pulling the 3 to be more thoughtful and consider more options, and then vice versa, right? Where the 3 is driving this, like, let's go, let's get it done, blah, blah, blah. But the 3 to 9, so that for 9, 3 is the growth or release line, but for 3, the 9 is the stress line. That's where like the 3 can become apathetic, or they go from like go 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 fast, let's do all these things, when are we going to go, when are we going to go, answer to just keep moving, to a little bit like I don't want to do anything, I'm just going to. But for 9, that line is more like allowing the competitive side to come out, allowing the drive to come out, and sort of not being scared of it or worried that competitiveness may cause conflict. You and I have heard we know several nines, but we've heard stories of nines that are like super competitive when it comes to certain things. Aaron
Mm-hmm.
is Aaron's this way in terms of like I've said this before on the podcast, but I'll say it again just as an example. I will not play Monopoly with him. Will not. For a guy who hates conflict, that all goes out the window as soon as you're playing Monopoly. So there, like, that kind of 3 thing can come out there. And I think generally
Interesting.
speaking, we've said this before, but nines get along with every number. But Aaron loves a 3, right? He kind of loves that energy and to like
Mm-hmm.
have that. It's sort of like he also loves the 8, that sort of banter thing that 3s and 8s do. As a
Yeah.
9, he kind of loves that thing.
I can definitely see that with Aaron. I also think nines really love to, like, if they're in really solid relationships with threes, even if it's like a friendship, nines are like also the best cheerleaders for the three. And that like feeds that three energy spirit. Like, my sister is a great cheerleader. Like, she froze her ass off when I ran the Madison half marathon, like just to watch me run a half marathon. And if there is ever a day, and I am not a three, but I'm very close to three in terms of how much three energy I have, and she will, if I call her and be like, I feel like shit about XYZ, she'll be like, why? Stop. You're great. You're a beautiful sunflower. Right, Danny? This is a shout out for Danny. You're a beautiful ray of sunshine. Stop it. So I can see that with a nine.
We made it through all of them,
Wow, look at us.
but we would love
On
to hear from
time.
many on time. But we would love to hear from any of you, especially on the numbers where we're like, we don't know anybody for sure. Would love to hear about how that works for
Yeah,
you.
this was fun.
Yeah, this was good. All right. So we made it to the end. Please like, subscribe, follow, check out our Substack, all those things. Leave us a comment, drop us a DM, engage with our stuff out there on socials, all the things. That's super helpful to the pod. What's most helpful is if you either follow us on the podcast platforms or share episodes that you got something out of with a friend or a family member, whoever. All of that really helps the pod. But we appreciate everybody who's like listening and been down for all of these episodes. We're like well into the 60 something episode now. I don't remember exactly which one. 65 or
Exciting.
66. Yeah, but a lot. So, anything else?
Awesome. I don't think so.
Okay,
I have a
cool.
big week coming up next week. We're surprising the kids with a puppy, so
Ooh.
it's going to be a big week. We'll have to introduce them on the next one.
Yes. That'll be so fun. Oh, he'll have
All
to
right.
come have a Flora play date.
Totally.
Yeah.
He will need that.
Yeah. She'll think that's the best. All right.
Okay.
I'll talk to you later, Tana.
Bye.